What's going on? This is Medicosis Perfectionalis, where medicine makes perfect sense. Today we continue our physiology playlist. This is video number 58 in the series. It's time to talk about smooth muscle physiology. We'll talk about the myosin-light chain, the myosin-light chain phosphate, the kinase, the phosphatase, how the muscle contracts, relaxes, etc. We'll also talk about the calcium calmodulin system. So without further ado, let's get started. Please watch these videos in order. We've talked about this comparison before. Let's go. Skeletal muscles, cardiac muscles, smooth muscles. Striation, striated, striated, not striated, no sarcomere. The only one that's branched is the cardiac muscle. The only one that's voluntary is the skeletal muscle. The only one that's multinucleated is the skeletal muscle. Nerve supply, somatic because it's voluntary. Autonomic because they are involuntary. If you cut the nerve, can the muscle still contract? Nope. Yes, I can. I have the SA node and the AV node. Yes, I can. I have my enteric nervous system. If I am a gut, I also have the intrinsic myogenic response if I am a blood vessel. Troponin, present, absent, and this is huge. Let's say that you have a patient coming to you with central chest pain. You know, that severe, dull, aching pain as if there is an elephant sitting on your chest. The pain radiates to the left jaw, left shoulder, left arm, even your left pinky finger. The question is this a myocardial infarction or is this a diffuse esophageal spasm? Because by the way, their pain is exactly the same. It's identical. How can you tell the myocardial infarction patient from the diffuse esophageal spasm patient? Easy. You order serum troponin level. If it's high, it's coming from the heart. If troponin is not elevated in the serum, that's your esophagus, because smooth muscles do not have troponin. That's why when they die, they cannot release troponin. No duh. I am fully aware that the last third of the esophagus is smooth muscle, the upper 1/3 is skeletal muscle, and the middle portion is a mix. See, medicine makes so much sense once you understand what the flip you're talking about. Gap junction, absent, present. Give me example of skeletal muscles: biceps, triceps, quadriceps, hamstrings. Cardiac muscle, that's the heart. Smooth muscles, you have the stomach wall, the intestinal wall, the wall of the colon, the wall of the blood vessels, and your iris muscles. You have the constrictor pupillae muscle and the dilator pupillae muscle. You have ciliary muscle, you have all kinds of muscle. Now let's talk about the gap junction or the nexus. What are the companies that make smartphone? Oh, we have Apple, we have Samsung, we have Huawei, we have gap junction. I mean nexus, that's a stupid joke. Anywho, gap junction is a gap between cells. So here is a smooth muscle cell, smooth muscle cell, smooth muscle cell. In between you have what? A nexus or a gap junction. What happens is when the nerve brings an action potential to the muscle, this action potential is going to propagate down the gap junction, and all of these lovely smooth muscle fibers are gonna contract simultaneously at the same millisecond. Why is this? Because you have a gap junction. Your heart has it and your smooth muscle has it. And that's why both ventricles contract at the same time. Because they have nexus. Because they contract together as one unit. Hashtag syncytium. Smooth muscles come in two shapes. You have the visceral, or a single unit, or a multi-unit. Where do you find this visceral smooth muscle? I found them in the viscera, no duh, such as your gut, your gastrointestinal tract, your blood vessels. How about multi-units? Your eye muscles. Are you talking about the extraocular muscles? Nope, shut up. Extraocular muscles are skeletal. I'm talking about smooth. I'm talking about your ciliary muscles, your pupillary constrictor, pupillary dilator, etc. Your vas deferens is also multi-unit. Fibers of the visceral ones. Oh, they aggregate together at a single unit. They have gap junction. The action potential can spread from one cell to the next very quickly. That's why they contract together as a syncytium. All of your ventricles contract at the same time. On the other hand, the multi-unit, the fibers are separated, as you see here. Gap junction is absent. Action potential cannot spread. If you want to supply me with nerve, a nerve has to come and kiss each muscle until the frog turns into a prince. The all or none law. Okay, since all of us contract together, we will obey the all or none law. Translation, we cannot be graded, we cannot be summated. It's either we contract together as one team or we do not contract at all. It's either 0 or 1. How about the multi-unit? Nope, they cannot obey. You know why? Because they are gazillion of muscle fibers contracting independently of each other. This is strong, this is stronger, this is even stronger. It can be graded, that's why it does not obey the all or none law. Why is this important? Think about it. Let's say we are talking about your stomach. Your stomach fundus has gazillion muscle fibers. If all of them contract together, that's cool. No big deal, no problem. It's better when they contract together so that they can pass the food from the fundus to the pylorus, and then the pylorus will push it from the pylorus to the fundus, and then from the fundus, that's how you mix your food and you digest it. Let's talk about the blood vessel in the third phalanx of my little finger. If all of the fibers contract together, no problem whatsoever. But look at your eye. What if all of your constrictor pupillae muscle contracted together strongly just due to an exposure to teeny tiny bits of light, just 5 nits of light? That will be disastrous, because if they're gonna contract maximally just with 5 nits of light, what the flip will they do when there is sunlight? These are very fine movements. They need to constrict more, even more, and then when they dilate more, even more, depending on the amount of light that there is. That's why they cannot obey the all or none law. That's why they do not have a sensation. The same concept applies to my vas difference. If the entire vas difference contracted together, my sperm is not gonna move at all. My sperm is going to be suffocated, for that matter. But the first part of the vas difference will have to contract, and then the second part will relax, and then the second part contract, and the third part relax, etc., etc. They cannot contract together as a syncytium. They cannot obey the all or none law because they can't be graded. Who controls gut contraction? Neural factor, endocrinal factor, periclinal factors. How about the multi-unit? Only neural, and by the way, they are densely innervated, because they do not have a gap junction. Here you can just send one nerve, because one nerve fiber, one action potential, and the gap junction will pass it to all of the fibers. But here you can't, so you have to go and kiss each one. That's why it's densely innervated. How about my cardiac muscles? Do they have gap junctions? Absolutely. If you look at the definition of nexus in the dictionary, you'll find a picture of the heart next to it. Just joking. That's why both atria contract together as one syncytium, and both ventricles contract together as one syncytium. Why don't the atria and ventricles contract together as one syncytium? Shut up, doofus. That will be a disaster. First of all, there's a connective tissue separating the two atria upstairs from the two ventricles downstairs. Moreover, you have the beautiful AV node, atrioventricular node, with its long, boring delay. It keeps the nerve impulse hanging so that both atria finish contracting, and then I will pass the impulse to both ventricles so that they can contract together after the atria have already contracted. Smooth muscles have no sarcomere, no interdigitating thick and thin filaments. I did not say no thick and thin filaments, because smooth muscles have actin and myosin, but the interdigitations and the sarcomeres are not there. That's why there are no striations, no branches, not voluntary, no troponin. Instead, you have something called calmodulin. No T-tubules or no sarcoplasmic reticulum, or you can say they are not absent, they are just poorly developed. Why do we have no troponin in smooth muscles? Think about it. What was the function of troponin in skeletal muscles to begin with? Well, troponin was kind of like a gatekeeper, preventing myosin from binding actin. Yeah. In other words, troponin is anti-contraction. Of course it makes sense, because your biceps, a skeletal muscle, needs to relax at some point. It just contracts sometimes, relaxes the other time. However, look at your blood vessel. Your blood vessel always needs a certain level of tone. Your intestines are always contracting because you eat 3 meals a day and you snack in between, so they kind of always work. They do not need to relax that much. That's why there is no troponin. So smooth muscles, no sarcomeres, no striations, no branches, not voluntary, no troponin, no T-tubules, no sarcoplasmic reticulum. What they do have is calmodulin. That's unique to smooth muscles. Skeletal muscles do not have calmodulin. What's the function of calmodulin? The name has the answer. Y-I-N, because it's a protein. Why cal? Because it's calcium. Why module? Because it modulates. It's a calcium modulating protein, calmodulin. When calcium binds calmodulin, it causes contraction. So calcium, calmodulin, contraction. Never ever forget this. Moreover, in smooth muscles, the thin filaments, actin, are attached to dense bodies. They are not attached to the Z or Z lines. Smooth muscles have fewer sodium channels, but they have more voltage-gated calcium channel. That's why you need calcium with the calmodulin. Who's faster at depolarization? Sodium or calcium? Sodium is faster. Calcium is slower. Which makes perfect sense because your skeletal muscles, biceps, triceps, quadriceps, are important for survival when you're running from a tiger. Your smooth muscles, we can wait for your stomach to contract. It's not the end of the world if it took extra 2 milliseconds. Do you remember myosin? Yeah, it had 2 heavy chains and 4 light chains. The heavy chains are dark, the light chains are this light blue color. Where are the light chains located? In the heads. So myosin has light chain. We can call it myosin light chain. Here's the myosin light chain. It has 2 forms. Myosin light chain with phosphate, we call it myosin light chain phosphate, and this is active, which means contraction. Or myosin light chain without phosphate, and this is passive or relaxed. Let's say that medicosis loves apples. Medicosis with the apple is active. Take the apple from medicosis, and now medicosis is passive. Myosin light chain with the phosphate is active. Take the phosphate from it, now it's passive. Give it the phosphate back, it's active and happy. Take the phosphate, it's relaxed and passive. What's the name of the enzyme that adds phosphate? A kinase. So we will call this myosin light chain kinase, which adds a phosphate to the myosin light chain to convert it into myosin light chain phosphate. How about an enzyme that removes phosphate? It's called a phosphatase, myosin light chain phosphatase, which removes a phosphate from the myosin light chain phosphate to turn it into myosin light chain without phosphate. Calcium binds calmodulin, causing contraction. How come? Because calcium binds calmodulin and this activates the myosin light chain kinase to add the phosphate to the myosin light chain to become myosin light chain phosphate, which will cause contraction of the smooth muscle. How about relaxation? Well, if you unrelax, shut down the calcium, and let's talk about phosphatase. Who can activate phosphatase? You have many factors, including nitric oxide. Arginine can become nitric oxide by an enzyme known as nitric oxide synthase. So the contractors are calcium calmodulin. The relaxers are arginine nitric oxide, guanylate cyclase, GTP, cyclic GMP, protein kinase G. All of this leads to relaxation because they activate the phosphatase. Do we have medications that relax smooth muscles such as blood vessels? Yeah, all of these medications will dilate blood vessels. Ready? Hydralazine, nitroprusside nitrates, sildenafil, tadalafil, vardenafil, minoxidil diazoxide. The last 2 have a different mechanism. They open the potassium channel, causing hyperpolarization and then relaxation. But the first 6 medication relax the blood vessel wall via activating myosin light chain phosphatase. Let's talk about these medications. 3 are here, the other 3 are here. Let's talk about hydralazine, nitroprusside nitrate. How do they work? They are prodrugs of nitric oxide. What's nitric oxide? It's here, it came from arginine. Oh yeah, so they're kind of a booster to nitric oxide. That's true. Nitric oxide activates guanylate cyclase, which converts GTP into cyclic GMP. Cyclic GMP will activate protein kinase G, which activates myosin light chain phosphatase, which removes the phosphate from the myosin light chain phosphate so that it becomes myosin light chain without a phosphate. Without the phosphate, it is sad and inactive and relaxed. Smooth muscles and relaxed. Where are the smooth muscles? They are in the blood vessels and in the erectile tissue. When the smooth muscles in the blood vessel relax, the vessel will dilate. When the smooth muscles in the erectile tissue dilate, my PP will get erect. And that's why we have sildenafil, tadalafil, vardenafil. This is Viagra, Cialis, etc. How do they work? They inhibit the destroyer of cyclic GMP. They inhibit phosphatase 5, which metabolizes cyclic GMP. When you inhibit the inhibitor of cyclic GMP is going to increase. More cyclic GMP, more protein kinase G, more muscle relaxation. And that's why sildenafil, tadalafil, vardenafil are used to treat impotence or erectile dysfunction. But please be careful, there is a fatal drug-drug interaction between this group and this group. Why is this? Let's say a patient is taking nitrates for his heart and he's taking sildenafil for his PP. If you take both together, guess what's going to happen? Oh, both of which are increasing protein kinase G, both of which are activating phosphatase, both of which are relaxing my smooth muscles. Oh, when you relax your blood vessel too much, what do you get? Severe vasodilation, causing what? Well, when the radius of the artery goes up, the total peripheral resistance is gonna go down. And when the total peripheral resistance goes down, what's gonna happen to your mean systemic arterial blood pressure? It's gonna go down a lot. Severe hypotension, which can kill you. And if the severe hypotension did not kill you, the reflex tachycardia will never ever combine any two of these 6 medications. It's a bad choice. How about minoxidil and diazoxide? Slightly different mechanism. They are potassium channel openers. When you open potassium channels, potassium is going to leave. You know why? Because there is more potassium inside the cell than outside of the cell. That's true. Potassium is more prevalent in the intracellular fluid. So when potassium leaves, when a positive leaves, the inside becomes more negative. And negative equals hyperpolarization, inactivation. And that's how they dilate blood vessels. When you add a phosphate, it's called phosphorylation. When you remove a phosphate, it's called dephosphorylation. Pause and review. Some interesting facts about smooth muscles. Smooth muscles contract at a slower rate than skeletal muscles, and that's why they use less ATP. By the way, why do they contract at a slower rate than skeletal muscles? Because they depend on calcium and not sodium, and calcium is slower. Oh yeah. The dephosphorate cross bridges remain attached to the actin at all time. Remember skeletal muscles? Yeah. After myosin is done binding to actin, what's going to happen? Tropomyosin is going to come and cover the actin. Troponin is going to come and cover the actin. However, in smooth muscle, the myosin will never leave the actin because you need some degree of tone in your smooth muscles. Calcium can enter the cell via a variety of methods. It can come from the outside, it can come from the inside, etc. Smooth muscles have spontaneous contraction. Even if you cut the nerve to your gut, if you cut the vagus, the stomach is not going to die. But if you cut my musculocutaneous nerve, the biceps is going to atrophy. It's gone. What the flip is the difference? The gut has intrinsic nervous system called the enteric nervous system, which is subdivided into the myenteric and the submucosal plexus. Smooth muscles have plasticity. What the flip is that? If you remember my pulmonology place, we've talked about the concept of compliance. This is almost the same thing. Compliance is delta V over delta V. Alright, what's the difference between a compliant stomach and a non-compliant stomach? Alright, when the compliant stomach sees the food coming, it's going to relax and expand a lot. So the volume is going to go up so that the pressure doesn't have to increase a lot. When numerator increases and the denominator does not change, what's going to happen to compliance? It's going to increase a lot. A non-compliant stomach will not relax as much. So the compliance is lower because the rise in volume was lower. Your smooth muscles are very compliant. They have plasticity. In the stomach, by the way, it's called receptive relaxation if you remember your GI physiology. And this allows you to go to a buffet and keep eating and eating and eating and eating and eating without vomiting. Where is the food? It's in the fundus of your stomach because it has a receptive relaxation. It's very compliant. It can relax and relax and dilate, and the pressure is not going to increase that much. That's why you do not vomit. But this is, of course, good within limits. If you're a doofus who eats too much, eventually you will vomit because the pressure will say, you know what, screw it. Do you remember my comparison of somatic nervous system versus autonomic nervous system? Yeah, somatic for somatic or skeletal muscles. Autonomic is for cardiac muscles, smooth muscles, and glands. Somatic is an operator. If you cut my musculocutaneous nerve, my biceps will atrophy. If you cut my radial nerve, my triceps is history. But if you cut the vagus, the stomach is not gonna die because the vagus is a coordinator of the stomach. The vagus tells the stomach to increase motility and secretion. But without the vagus, the stomach knows how to move and how to secrete, although to a lesser extent. Autonomic nervous system is not just sympathetic and parasympathetic, it's also the enteric nervous system in your gut. Myenteric for motility, submucosal for secretion. Your cardiac muscles and smooth muscles have a very important thing in common, which is the automaticity, the intrinsic activity. In the heart, it's called the SA node and AV node. In the smooth muscle, it's called myenteric and submucosal. The job of the sympathetic or the vagus is to increase or decrease heart rate and contractility. The job of the vagus or sympathetic here is to increase or decrease motility/secretions. So what if I cut the sympathetic or the parasympathetic supply of my heart? No problem, the heart will continue to pump. What if I cut the vagus or the sympathetic supply to the stomach? No problem, the stomach can continue to function. Because for these organs, the nerve supply is a regulator, not an operator. Now I will leave you with question 22, which is a case with 3 questions. Please read the case. Here's the first question, second question, and here is question 3. You'll find the answers in the next video. If you like this video, you will love my endocrine pharmacology course on my website, medicosisperfectionalis.com. I also have a cardiac pharmacology course on the website. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, hit the bell, and click on the join button. You can support me here or here. Go to my website, download my courses. Thank you for watching. Be safe, stay happy, study hard. This is Medicosis Perfectionalis, where medicine makes perfect sense.